The modern psyche, so often celebrated for its supposed transparency and self-awareness, frequently operates under a grand illusion, the illusion of complete conscious dominion. We navigate our lives armed with rational plans, articulated desires, and a belief that our choices are the products of deliberate thought. Yet, beneath this veneer of control, a vast and turbulent ocean roils, the unconscious. It is a realm Sigmund Freud, with the audacity of a deep-sea explorer, first charted with systematic rigor, warning us that its currents profoundly shape our existence, whether we acknowledge them or not. To ignore the persistent whispers, the subtle tremors emanating from this hidden domain, is not merely an oversight, it is to risk navigating the complexities of life with a faulty compass, perpetually surprised by the storms we inadvertently summon and the destinations we unintentionally reach. This exploration, therefore, is not a mere academic revisiting of Freudian thought, but an urgent invitation to decipher the often cryptic messages emerging from our own depths, messages that hold the key to our truest motivations and, perhaps, to a more authentic way of being. Freud's proposition was, and in many quarters remains, a radical affront to the Enlightenment's legacy of pure reason and the subsequent cult of individual agency. If our conscious minds are not the sole masters of our inner house, if there are hidden architects designing our fears, shaping our desires, and even scripting our accidental words and deeds, then what becomes of our cherished notions of free will and self-determination? The dominant narrative, particularly in societies prizing productivity and straightforward intentionality, often encourages a dismissal of these subterranean influences. We are urged to think positive, to override unwanted feelings, to present a consistent and rational self to the world. Yet, as Freud meticulously documented, that which is suppressed does not simply vanish, it morphs, seeking expression through indirect, often perplexing, pathways. The very act of ignoring these signals, therefore, is not a sign of strength or control, but a form of self-deception, a refusal to engage with the totality of one's being. This text endeavors to illuminate these often overlooked manifestations, to understand their historical conceptualization, their subtle disguises, their impact on our autonomy, and ultimately, to explore pathways toward a more integrated and comprehending relationship with this powerful, inescapable aspect of ourselves. The contemporary discomfort with the unconscious is, in part, a fear of what it might reveal, the inconvenient truths, the unpalatable desires, the unresolved conflicts that challenge our carefully constructed self-image. It is far easier to attribute a slip of the tongue to tiredness than to a hidden resentment, or a recurring dream to indigestion rather than an unfulfilled longing. Yet, Freud's warning was precisely about the cost of such dismissals. He posited that the unconscious is not a passive repository of forgotten memories but a dynamic, active force, constantly seeking expression and influencing our present reality. These signs, then, are not random noise but vital communications from a part of ourselves that holds profound wisdom, albeit often couched in symbolic language. To truly understand our hidden motivations, we must become adept deciphers of this internal script, learning to listen with an ear attuned to nuance, to paradox, and to the silences that speak volumes. The journey is not about dredging up demons for their own sake, but about reclaiming lost parts of the self, integrating them, and thereby moving towards a more conscious and liberated existence. The challenge, of course, lies in the elusive nature of these signs. They are not typically announced with fanfare but are woven into the fabric of our daily lives, masquerading as normalcy or triviality. This exploration will delve into the varied forms these manifestations take, from the seemingly innocuous Freudian slip to the complex architecture of dreams, from unexplained anxieties to repetitive patterns of behavior that leave us feeling trapped. We will consider how these signals, far from being mere quirks, are emissaries from a deeper stratum of our being, carrying messages that, if heeded, can illuminate the path to greater self-understanding and psychological freedom. It is a call to move beyond the surface, to question the readily available explanations, and to engage with the rich, often unsettling, complexity of our inner worlds, for it is there, in the shadowed landscapes of the unconscious, that many of our most profound truths reside. The concept of an influential realm beyond conscious awareness did not spring fully formed from Freud's mind, rather, it has ancient roots, murmuring through philosophical treatises and artistic expressions long before psychoanalysis gave it a clinical framework. Think of the Greek tragedies, where protagonists are driven by forces they neither understand nor control, or the Romantic poets who celebrated the power of intuition, dreams, and the sublime, often locating the source of creativity in a mysterious inner depth. Philosophers like Schopenhauer, with his notion of a blind, striving will, and Nietzsche, with his exploration of primal instincts, prefigured the Freudian unconscious, suggesting that human beings are moved by currents far deeper than rational thought. This intellectual climate, increasingly questioning the sufficiency of pure reason in the wake of industrialization and burgeoning societal complexities, provided fertile ground for a more systematic inquiry into the non-rational aspects of the human mind. Freud's genius lay not in discovering the unconscious, but in conceptualizing it as a structured, dynamic entity, subject to its own laws and knowable through its manifestations. He provided a vocabulary and a methodology, dream analysis, free association, to explore this previously uncharted territory, transforming it from a vague philosophical notion into a domain of psychological investigation. The impact of Freud's early work, particularly The Interpretation of Dreams, 1900, and The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, 1901, was nothing short of revolutionary and profoundly unsettling to the prevailing Victorian sensibilities. His assertion that sexuality, often repressed and disguised, played a crucial role in psychic life from infancy, and that dreams were not random neural firings but wish fulfillments, challenged deeply ingrained societal norms and beliefs about human nature, innocence, and rationality. The talking cure, developed initially with Joseph Breuer, suggested that bringing repressed memories and emotions into conscious awareness could alleviate neurotic symptoms. This was a radical departure from the purely somatic or moralistic explanations for mental distress common at the time. The very idea that slips of the tongue, parapraxis, forgotten names, or bungled actions were not mere accidents but meaningful intrusions from the unconscious, revealing hidden intentions or conflicts, implied a psyche far more complex and conflict-ridden than previously imagined. This historical context is crucial. Freud's ideas were not just academic theories, they were a profound cultural intervention, forcing a re-evaluation of what it means to be human. The resistance he encountered was, in itself, a testament to the power of the very repressive forces he sought to describe, a societal defense mechanism against uncomfortable truths. As psychoanalysis evolved, it branched into various schools of thought, with prominent figures like Carl Jung and Alfred Adler, initially Freud's disciples, developing their own distinct theories. Jung expanded the concept of the unconscious to include a collective unconscious, a repository of archetypes and ancestral experiences shared by all humanity, while Adler focused on the drive for power and the impact of feelings of inferiority. Later thinkers, such as Melanie Klein, Donald Winnicott, and Jacques Lacan, further refined and reinterpreted Freudian concepts, each adding layers of complexity and nuance. Despite these divergences and the relentless critiques psychoanalysis has faced, from its perceived lack of empirical testability to its patriarchal biases, the core insight of an active, influential unconscious has profoundly permeated Western culture and beyond. Its language has seeped into everyday discourse, think Freudian slip, ego, repression, and its influence can be traced in literature, art, film, critical theory, and even marketing. The evolution of these ideas shows not a static doctrine, but a vibrant, contested, and continually developing field of inquiry, wrestling with the most fundamental questions of human motivation and experience. The enduring legacy, regardless of specific theoretical allegiances, is the irreversible awareness that what we consciously know of ourselves is only a fraction of the story. One of the most compelling, and often frustrating, aspects of the unconscious is its masterful ability to disguise its manifestations as natural or inevitable. These are not always dramatic eruptions but subtle infiltrations into our daily existence, so seamlessly woven into the texture of our lives that we rarely pause to question their origins or deeper significance. Consider the gut feeling or intuition that guides a major life decision, often attributed to a vague sense of knowing. While sometimes these feelings can be astute syntheses of subliminal cues, they can also be the echo of an unresolved childhood fear or a deeply ingrained, unexamined belief system, masquerading as wisdom. Similarly, the chronic procrastinator who always has a valid reason for delay, too busy, not the right time, needing more information, might be unconsciously sabotaging themselves due to a fear of failure, or paradoxically, a fear of success and the changes it might bring. The unnaturalness of these patterns lies in their familiarity and the ego's sophisticated defense mechanisms, particularly rationalization, which provides plausible, socially acceptable explanations for behaviors whose true roots lie buried. The dynamic that maintains the power of these disguised signals is precisely the ego's investment in maintaining a coherent and comfortable self-narrative. The ego, in Freudian terms, mediates between the primal urges of the id, the moralistic demands of the superego, and the constraints of external reality. To acknowledge the raw, often contradictory, impulses bubbling up from the unconscious would frequently create dissonance, anxiety, or shame. Thus, defense mechanisms spring into action, not as pathological processes per se, but as adaptive strategies for managing internal conflict. Projection, for instance, allows us to attribute our own unacceptable feelings or thoughts to others, making the world seem hostile rather than acknowledging our own aggression. Denial allows us to ignore painful realities. Repetition compulsion, the unconscious reenactment of past traumas or relationship patterns, often feels like an inescapable fate. This always happens to me, rather than a pattern actively, if unconsciously, co-created. These dynamics are not merely individual. Cultural narratives and societal norms also play a role in sanctioning certain disguises while pathologizing others, further obscuring the unconscious roots of widespread behaviors or beliefs. A culture that glorifies relentless work, for example, might provide a natural cover for workaholism driven by deep-seated anxieties about inadequacy. Imagine an individual, let's call her Sarah, who consistently finds herself in romantic relationships with partners who are emotionally unavailable and critical. Consciously, Sarah desires a loving, supportive partnership. She might tell herself, "I just have bad luck with men," or "I'm attracted to strong, independent types, and they just happen to be a bit distant." These are her natural explanations. However, a deeper psychoanalytic inquiry might reveal an early childhood experience with a critical and emotionally distant parent, leading to an unconscious belief that love is conditional and must be earned through striving, or that criticism is a familiar, therefore safe, form of interaction. Her attraction to unavailable partners is not bad luck, but an unconscious attempt to master this early dynamic, to finally win the love and approval she craved, or to confirm a deeply held belief about her own unworthiness. The inevitability of her relationship patterns is, in fact, a complex psychic script being played out. Her true motivation, perhaps a profound fear of intimacy, or a need to heal an old wound, remains hidden beneath layers of rationalization and the perceived naturalness of her type. This illustrates how the unconscious, through subtle disguises, can orchestrate significant life patterns, maintaining its influence precisely because its workings are not recognized as such. This subtle camouflage extends beyond individual relationship patterns into nearly every facet of life, from career choices that feel sensible but leave one unfulfilled, to inexplicable phobias or anxieties that seem to arise from nowhere. That inevitability often stems from a narrowed perceptual field, where unconscious biases and assumptions filter reality in such a way that only certain options or interpretations appear viable. Think of the individual who believes they are naturally uncreative because they struggled in art class as a child, failing to recognize the impact of a single critical comment that, unconsciously, cemented a limiting self-belief. Or consider societal phenomena, the natural order of social hierarchies, the inevitable march of technological progress without regard for human cost, or the cyclical nature of political polarization. These too can be viewed through a lens that acknowledges underlying collective anxieties, unexamined historical traumas, or shared unconscious fantasies that propel societies along certain trajectories, often rationalized post hoc as logical or unavoidable developments. The power of these disguised unconscious forces lies in their pervasiveness and our collective habituation to them, making the task of uncovering them a truly counterintuitive and often countercultural endeavor. The unacknowledged sway of the unconscious has profound implications for individual and collective autonomy. If our choices, beliefs, and emotional responses are significantly shaped by forces outside our conscious awareness, then the very notion of a fully autonomous self, making decisions in a purely rational and self-determined manner, becomes a questionable ideal rather than an attainable reality. This is not to say that free will is an illusion, but rather that its scope is often more circumscribed than we like to believe. An individual perpetually caught in cycles of self-sabotage, perhaps starting ambitious projects only to abandon them at the cusp of success, or repeatedly engaging in behaviors detrimental to their health despite consciously wanting to change, is experiencing a direct assault on their autonomy. They may feel like a puppet pulled by invisible strings, their conscious intentions overridden by deeper, unexamined compulsions. This internal conflict between conscious desires and unconscious directives can lead to feelings of frustration, helplessness, and a diminished sense of personal agency. The hidden motivations Freud spoke of are not benign. They can actively undermine our capacity to live in accordance with our stated values and goals. The dynamics maintaining this erosion of autonomy are complex and self-reinforcing. Repressed material, unacknowledged traumas, forbidden desires, unresolved conflicts, does not remain inert. It actively seeks expression, often manifesting as symptoms, compulsive behaviors, or distorted perceptions that limit our range of responses to the world. For example, an individual with an unacknowledged fear of abandonment might become excessively clingy in relationships, paradoxically driving partners away, thereby confirming their unconscious fear and reinforcing the limiting pattern. On a collective level, societal unconsciousness can manifest in pervasive prejudices, irrational scapegoating, or adherence to destructive ideologies. When a group or nation is driven by unexamined collective anxieties or historical grievances, its capacity for rational decision-making and constructive action is severely impaired. The groupthink phenomenon, where dissenting opinions are suppressed in favor of a comforting but flawed consensus, can be seen as a collective defense mechanism, protecting the group from confronting uncomfortable truths at the cost of its collective autonomy and long-term well-being. The power of these hidden dynamics lies in their ability to short-circuit critical thinking and conscious deliberation, substituting them with emotionally charged, often primitive, reactions. Consider the generic case of a highly skilled professional who consistently fails to negotiate for fair compensation or advocate for their own advancement, despite consciously believing they deserve more. They might rationalize this by saying they dislike conflict, aren't good at self-promotion, or that hard work should speak for itself. However, an exploration of their unconscious might reveal a deep-seated belief, perhaps absorbed in childhood, that asking for what one wants is selfish, or that being too successful will invite envy or abandonment. This unconscious script, operating beneath the surface of their professional persona, effectively curtails their autonomy in the workplace, preventing them from achieving their full potential or reaping the rewards of their efforts. Their choice to remain undercompensated is not a free choice in the truest sense, but one heavily constrained by unexamined psychological forces. Similarly, on a societal scale, consider a community that repeatedly elects leaders who enact policies detrimental to its long-term environmental or economic health. This could be driven by unconscious anxieties about change, a collective longing for a romanticized past, or a susceptibility to simplistic narratives that soothe immediate fears while ignoring complex realities. The autonomy of such a community to make sustainable, future-oriented decisions is compromised by these underlying, unacknowledged currents. The impact on autonomy is not merely about making wrong choices, it's about the constriction of the self, the foreclosure of possibilities. When significant portions of our psychic energy are consumed by maintaining repressions or enacting unconscious defenses, there is less energy available for creativity, growth, and authentic engagement with the world. We may find ourselves living a life that feels prescribed rather than chosen, driven by shoulds and musts whose origins are obscure. The artistic impulse might be stifled by an unconscious fear of judgment, the capacity for deep intimacy thwarted by an unconscious fear of vulnerability, or the pursuit of a meaningful career derailed by an unconscious sense of unworthiness. This is the insidious cost of ignoring the signs from our unconscious, a life lived at a fraction of its potential capacity, a diminished sense of aliveness, and a recurring bewilderment as to why our best-laid plans so often go awry. The promise of engaging with these signs, therefore, is not just self-knowledge for its own sake, but the potential to reclaim lost territories of the self and expand the domain of conscious, autonomous choice. This is where Freud's warning becomes an invitation, to look within, not to find flaws, but to find freedom. Recognizing the pervasive influence of the unconscious and its often disguised manifestations naturally leads to the question, what can be done? How can we move from being unwitting actors in our own unconscious dramas to more conscious authors of our lives? The strategies for dismantling the more detrimental effects of the unconscious, or rather, for integrating its wisdom into conscious life, are not quick fixes but involve a sustained commitment to self-exploration and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. One of the foundational approaches, echoing Freud's own methods, involves paying close attention to the very signs often dismissed: dreams, slips of the tongue, accidental behaviors, and recurring patterns. Dream journaling, for instance, and attempting to understand the symbolic language of one's dreams, perhaps with the aid of a therapist or through careful self-reflection informed by psychoanalytic principles, can offer profound insights into underlying fears, desires, and unresolved conflicts. The context for such exploration is crucial. It necessitates a non-judgmental curiosity, an acceptance that the unconscious communicates in a language different from everyday logic, often rich in metaphor and personal symbolism. The hidden dynamic that often keeps the power of unconscious patterns entrenched is the fear of the unknown and the resistance to change, even if that change is ultimately for the better. The familiar, however painful, can feel safer than the uncertainty of confronting and altering deeply ingrained patterns. Therefore, strategies for engaging with the unconscious must often address this inherent resistance. Psychotherapy, particularly psychoanalytically oriented therapy, provides a dedicated space and a therapeutic relationship designed to explore these hidden dynamics safely. Through processes like free association, saying whatever comes to mind without censorship, the analysis of transference, where unconscious feelings and patterns from past relationships are projected onto the therapist, and the careful interpretation of defenses, individuals can gradually bring unconscious material into awareness. This is not merely an intellectual exercise, it is an experiential process of reworking old patterns and integrating disowned parts of the self. Imagine someone who, through therapy, realizes their chronic indecisiveness stems from an unconscious fear of taking responsibility, rooted in an overly critical upbringing. This insight, gradually processed and understood emotionally, can empower them to make choices with greater confidence and intentionality, thereby dismantling the paralyzing effect of this unconscious fear. Beyond formal therapy, other practices can cultivate a greater awareness of unconscious processes. Mindfulness meditation, for example, by encouraging a non-judgmental observation of thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations as they arise, can help individuals become more attuned to the subtle signals from their inner world without immediately reacting to or rationalizing them. This creates a space between stimulus and response, where conscious choice becomes more possible. Creative expression, through writing, painting, music, or dance, can also serve as a powerful channel for unconscious material to find form and meaning, bypassing the censorship of the conscious mind. Consider an amateur painter who finds themselves repeatedly drawn to dark, turbulent imagery. Instead of dismissing it, they explore these themes, allowing the emotions and associations to surface. This creative process might reveal unacknowledged grief or anger, which can then be addressed more consciously, rather than festering and influencing behavior in hidden ways. The key is to shift from a stance of ignoring or suppressing these internal stirrings to one of curious engagement, recognizing them not as aberrations but as valuable data about one's inner landscape. Ultimately, strategies for engaging with the unconscious are about fostering a new kind of internal dialogue, one characterized by honesty, courage, and compassion. It involves challenging the naturalness of our assumptions and behaviors, asking why more often, and being open to answers that may initially be unsettling. This is not a one-time task but an ongoing practice of self-awareness. It might involve noticing the subtle bodily tension that arises when a particular topic is discussed, reflecting on why certain people or situations trigger disproportionately strong emotional reactions, or examining the narratives we construct about our lives and questioning their unstated premises. The dismantling is less about eradication and more about integration, bringing the unconscious into a more harmonious and cooperative relationship with the conscious mind. This allows its energy and wisdom to be harnessed for growth and creativity, rather than acting as a disruptive or sabotaging force. The illustrative case here is perhaps the most universal. Any individual who commits to this path gradually finds their autonomy expanding, their relationships deepening, and their life feeling more authentically their own, as they learn to navigate by the full constellation of their inner stars, not just the ones visible in the daylight of consciousness. This engagement can transform the unconscious from a source of unseen coercion into a wellspring of profound insight and personal evolution. The journey into the labyrinth of the unconscious, as signposted by Freud and further illuminated by generations of thinkers and practitioners, is undoubtedly one of the most profound and challenging endeavors a human being can undertake. It begins with the unsettling recognition that the I we present to the world, and even to ourselves, is but a partial edifice, built upon foundations largely hidden from direct view. The dominant cultural narratives that champion unwavering rationality, complete self-control, and the transparent self often do us a disservice, encouraging a flight from the very depths that hold crucial keys to our motivations, our suffering, and our potential for genuine transformation. To heed Freud's implicit warning, that what is unexamined will inevitably exert its power, is not to succumb to a deterministic view of human nature, but rather to embrace a more complete and ultimately more empowering understanding of our intricate psychological architecture. The signs are always there, whispering in dreams, erupting in slips of the tongue, shaping our accidental choices, and coloring our emotional responses. The question is whether we possess the courage to listen. Synthesizing the insights gleaned from this exploration, it becomes clear that the manifestations of the unconscious are not mere psychological curiosities but vital communiques deserving of our most serious attention. Historically, the conceptualization of the unconscious marked a pivotal shift in understanding the human mind, moving beyond simplistic notions of rationality. We've seen how these unconscious influences cleverly disguise themselves as natural inclinations or inevitable life patterns, their power often maintained by the ego's need for coherence and the societal normalization of certain avoidances. The impact on individual and collective autonomy is undeniable, as unacknowledged drives and unresolved conflicts can constrict our choices, fuel self-sabotage, and lead to repetitive, unfulfilling cycles. Yet, this is not a counsel of despair. The very act of recognizing these dynamics is the first step towards reclaiming a measure of agency. Strategies such as attentive self-reflection, therapeutic exploration, and creative expression offer pathways not to eliminate the unconscious, an impossible and undesirable goal, but to engage with it more consciously and constructively. The transformative path forward, then, involves a fundamental redefinition of our relationship with our inner world. It requires cultivating an attitude of compassionate curiosity towards the parts of ourselves we have been taught to ignore, fear, or disown. This is not about achieving a mythical state of perfect self-knowledge, but about embarking on a lifelong process of becoming more aware, more integrated, and more accepting of our inherent complexity. Practically, this can translate into carving out regular time for introspection, whether through journaling, meditation, or simply quiet contemplation, paying particular attention to moments of dissonance, strong emotional reactions, or recurring patterns that seem to defy conscious intention. It means being willing to question our own narratives, to consider alternative interpretations of our behavior and motivations, and to seek feedback from trusted others who might offer a different perspective on our blind spots. Engaging with art, literature, and mythology can also provide rich symbolic material that resonates with our own unconscious themes, offering new ways to understand our personal journeys. Ultimately, the most profound transformation comes from embracing the unconscious not as an adversary to be conquered or a pathology to be cured, but as an intrinsic, vital part of our humanity, a source of immense creativity, intuition, and profound wisdom, alongside its capacity to house our deepest wounds and anxieties. To ignore its signs is to live a life partially blindfolded, guided by forces we refuse to acknowledge. To heed its messages, however cryptic or uncomfortable they may initially seem, is to embark on a path towards greater authenticity, resilience, and a more expansive sense of self. This is the enduring relevance of Freud's warning. It is a call to wholeness, an invitation to explore the totality of our being, and in doing so, to unlock the hidden motivations that, once understood, can empower us to live more consciously, more freely, and more fully. The true adventure lies not in charting distant lands, but in navigating the rich, often uncharted, territories within.